Hello my friends and welcome back to my channel. As you can tell, today's video is going to be a crochet poncho. Now, as you guys know, with a ton of my patterns and my tutorials, they are always made to measure. And of course, you can use any weight of yarn with a coordinating hook size, but for tutorial purposes, I will be using the Hobie Twister. Now, the Hobie Twister is technically labeled as a number 2 fine weight fiber. So to me, it kind of resembles like a sock weight, a fingering weight, but overall, I will be double stranding this yarn at all times. But as I was saying, the yarn will be held double throughout this pattern, and as I do so, overall it will give us more of a DK weight. So to go along with my DK weight, I decided to use a 5.5mm crochet hook. But as mentioned earlier, if you choose to use a lighter weight of yarn or even a thicker weight, just make sure that you're always using the recommended or coordinating hook size, or you can even choose to size up a little bit because we will be using somewhat of a mesh stitch. We have our DK weight yarn, we have our 5.5 crochet hook, and I would also highly recommend some stitch markers because we do need to place out where all of our increases are going to go for the poncho. So these are the basic materials that we need to get started. Let's quickly go into starting chain count and stitch count. So when it comes to the initial measurement and sizing of this poncho, there are two different ways that we can go about getting started. I like to kind of call this the symmetrical version and the asymmetrical version. But I will say that if you've ever followed any of my raglan tutorials or patterns, this is very, very similar to that, so you should be able to follow along. So for those of you who want a symmetrical poncho, meaning that all of our increases will be equally spaced away, we need our starting chain to be a multiple of 12. So 12 times 5, 12 times 6, 12 times 7, whatever the number may be. We just want this initial starting chain when connected in the round to be wide enough to fit over our head, and even for those who want it to kind of like fall off the shoulder so you have more of an off-shoulder poncho option. And our multiple of 12 actually counts as 4 times 3. 4 being the 4 corners that we're going to be increasing into, and then 3 being our stitch repeat because we will be doing this in multiples of 3. So that is for the symmetrical version. Now, if that is too much math for you guys and you don't really care about having equally spaced points, all we need is a starting chain in multiples of 3. This is going to be a little bit more fun because you can kind of pick and choose where exactly you want all of your increases to go instead of having a set amount that you're always counting for. So let's go ahead and start off with our symmetrical poncho. So for my symmetrical version, again, I need to be using multiples of 12. I'm going to do 12 times 6, which equals 72. So I'm going to start off with a very basic slip knot. And again, I always have my yarn double stranded to give me a DK weight. And from here, I can chain 72. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4. Here is my 72, and now we need to go ahead and connect this chain in the round. So I'm just going to follow my chain down and make sure that it doesn't get twisted, because that's going to cause some serious issues for us if we have like a twist in it as we begin working this very first row. And now that I'm sure that I don't have any twists in my chain, I'm going to pick up that very first chain in the row, and from here I can slip stitch the chain together. So now I should have my whole chain connected in the round, and we're ready to begin row 1. For our very first row, I'm just going to be placing 1 double crochet into every single chain space. So here after my slip stitch, I'm going to chain 3, and this is going to count as the first double crochet. So there's my chain of 3. Next, I'm going to yarn over and look at the next available chain space. So I'm just going to turn my work so I can pick up that back bump. And this is just going to help give us a little bit more stretch across the very first row. So here is another double, and again, yarn over, pick up the back bump, and work a regular double crochet. So here's the start of the row, and again, yarn over, pick up the back bump, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2. And now I can just repeat this until the very end of my row, and just make sure that you have the same stitch count as you did for your chains. So at the very end of this row, I should have 72 double crochet. So I've just made it back to the very start of my row, and I still have one more stitch to go. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish that up. And this is gonna count as my 72nd stitch. And now that we've picked up every single chain space in the row, we can go ahead and connect this in the round. What we want to do is pick up our chain 3. You can either go into the space right here and then slip stitch, but I'm just going to pick up the 2 top loops, or the 1 top loop in that chain of 3, and then slip stitch row 1 together. So this is what your row 1 should look like. And we can go ahead and begin working on row 2. What we want to do at the very start of row 2 is begin with our raglan increase, and it's going to consist of 2 double crochet, chain 3, and 2 double crochet, all going into the same exact stitch. So here at the very start of row 2, we're going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and again this counts as our very first double crochet. From here I'm going to yarn over and go right back into the same stitch. And here we're going to work another double crochet. After that, we're going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and then going back into the same exact stitch, we're going to place 2 more double crochet. So I'm going to yarn over and go right back into that stitch. Then we're going to work 1 double and 1 more time into that same stitch. So here is what our raglan increases are always going to look like. Again, we have 2 double crochet, chain 3, and then 2 more double crochet. And we're going to work this 4 times throughout the entire row. And throughout the rest of this tutorial, I'm going to reference this as our raglan increase. Now immediately after our first raglan increase, I'm going to chain 2, 1, 2, and we're going to skip 2 stitches, 1, 2, and work a double crochet in the next. So I'm just going to pick up that stitch and work a regular double crochet. And again, I can chain 2, 1, 2, skip 2 stitches, 1, 2, place a double crochet in the next. And again, chain 2, 1, 2, skip 2, and then work a double crochet in the next. Now because my initial starting chain was 12 times 6, that means that into every 6th double crochet space, I will work my raglan increase. So technically this is going to count as 6, and then we can start the count at 1, 2, 3. I need to work 2 more mesh stitches until I work my next raglan. So from here, I'm going to chain 2, skip 2, double crochet in the next. And that makes 4 double crochet. Then I'm chain 2, skip 2, double crochet in the next. So at this point, after my raglan increase, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Into my next double crochet space is where I'm going to work that following raglan increase. So I can chain 2 and skip 2, double crochet in the next. But again, here I'm going to work that raglan increase. So I'm going to work 2 double crochet into the same stitch. And then from here I can chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and then going right back into that same stitch. We're going to work 2 more double crochet. 1. Here is my second double crochet. So this is what my next raglan should be looking like. And again, just to clarify, I'm going to have 5 double crochet in between each raglan, meaning that my raglan is going to count as my 6th double crochet space, and I can start that stitch count all over again. Now for those of you that chained a larger number than I did, so for example 12 times 7, you're going to work your raglan increase into every 7th double crochet, meaning that you'll have 6 double crochet in between each of your raglan increases. And then again, for those that have 12 times 8 as their initial starting chain, you'll work your raglan increase into your 8th double crochet space, and then continue on like this for the rest of the row. So I'm just going to go ahead and show you guys the next few stitches so that we kind of understand how row 2 is looking. Immediately after this raglan increase, I'm going to chain 2 and skip 2, 1, 2, and work a double crochet in the next. So this counts as like 1 stitch, chain 2, skip 2, double crochet in the next. That's 2 double crochet, 1, 2, skip 2. Here is my 3rd double crochet. Here is my 4th double, chain 2, skip 2. Here is my 5th double crochet, meaning at the next double crochet space, chain 2 and skip 2. Into this 6th double crochet space, I can go ahead and work that raglan increase. So 2 double crochet into the same stitch, chain 3, and then again 2 more double crochet. So we have kind of this cute little fan cluster of stitches. And just to double check, we have a raglan increase right here, and then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 double crochet increase into the 6th space. And then I can go ahead and finish out the row. And at this point, I've reached the very end of row 2. As you can see, I still have 2 stitches remaining. So what I'm going to do after my last double crochet is chain 2 and skip those 2, and we're going to slip stitch into the chain 3 space from the very start of the row. So if this is my chain 3, you can either pick up those 2 top loops, or I'm just going to choose to go into the chain 3 space right there, and we can slip stitch the end of the row closed. So that is the end of row 2. And just to double check, here at my previous raglan increase, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 double crochet, and then the repeat here is at the 6th stitch, the raglan increase. So row 2 is complete, it's looking good, and we can go ahead and move on to row 3. Now for row 3 and onward, I want to work all of my raglan increases into this chain 3 space right here, but because we just slip stitched into the chain of 3 in that cluster, all I'm really going to do is pull up a little bit on my loop so that it's not too tight, and then I'm going to insert my hook into that chain 3 space, and I'm going to slip stitch here at the start of the row into that chain 3. We're kind of just moving our working yarn, or where we're going to start the row, into the center of that chain 3 area. And from here we can start off with our raglan increase. So again, I'm going to start with a chain of 3, 1, 2, 3. That counts as the very first double crochet. And then I'm going to go directly into this chain 3 space and work my 2nd double crochet. From here I can chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and then work 2 more double crochet into the same stitch. So we're just going right back into that very open space that we've created. And here is our first raglan at the very start of the row. And as you can see, it is perfectly stacked into the center of that raglan stitch. So after our raglan increase, I'm going to chain 2. And what I'm going to do here is work my next double crochet into this open mesh stitch. So technically we are still skipping 2 stitches right there. I'm going to yarn over and work my double crochet into the chain spaces rather than into the physical stitch space. So there is my first double crochet after that raglan increase. And then from here we can repeat the chain 2, skip 2, work a double crochet into this this mesh space. And then again, chain 2, skip 2, work your double into the open mesh space. And we can go ahead and repeat this until we reach our next raglan increase. So again, chain 2, skip 2, work your double crochet. Chain 2, skip 2, double crochet. And right here, before I reach my next raglan increase, I still have one more to work. So I'm going to chain 2, work into that open mesh space. And then from here, I can chain 2, skip 2, and then work my next raglan increase into the center of that stitch, so the chain 3 space. So I'm just going to go right into that center of the V and work 2 double crochet, chain 3, and then 2 more double, all into the same stitch. And that is what the next raglan increase is going to look like. And you'll begin to notice that with each following row, you're going to have one more double crochet in between each of the raglans. So on the row prior, I had 5 double crochet and then the raglan increase. Here I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 double crochet and then my raglan. And then that means on the following row, you'll have 7 double crochet in between and then your raglan. But moving on immediately after our raglan increase, I'm going to chain 2, and then I'm going to work my next double into the first available mesh space right here. So we're technically skipping 1, 2, and we're going to work right into this open space. Work a double, chain 2, work into this open space, and then repeat this until we reach our next raglan increase. Chain 2, here's the next mesh space, and now that we've reached our next raglan increase, again I can chain 2 and then work our 2 double into this space right here. So here's 1, 2 double crochet, chain of 3, 2, 3, and then 2 more double crochet, all into the same space. There's 1, and here is 2. So here's what that stitch pattern is looking like so far. And I can go ahead and repeat this process until the very end of my row. I'm starting to approach the end of row 3, and I'm just finishing up the last few mesh stitches. So right here is my very last mesh space. I'm going to work into that. And then now that we've reached the start of the row, so right here is our chain of 3, I'm going to chain 2 more. So chain 2 after that last double crochet, and then I'm going to pick up underneath that chain of 3 and then connect it in the round with the slip stitch. So I'm just pulling through that yarn so that row 3 is connected. And believe it or not, for row 4 and onwards, we're just going to be repeating the same steps from row 3 over and over. And as you begin to add on more rows, you'll notice your poncho get wider and wider and wider. And it's really up to you to determine how long and how wide you want your poncho to be. Let's go ahead and show you guys the start of row 4 here. So immediately after our slip stitch into that chain of 3, I'm going to pull up on the yarn a little bit, make it a little bit loose, and then I'm going to go into the chain 3 space of that raglan, and I'm going to slip stitch once more. So we're kind of just moving our working stitch or our live stitch, shifting it into the chain 3 space, and then from here I can start the next row. So I'm going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and then double crochet, and then chain 3 again, 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to work 2 more double crochet into the center of that raglan. So here's 1, and here is 2. And now we have all of our raglans stacked neatly on top of each other. And from here I can chain 2, work our next double crochet into the first available mesh space, which is right here. And then chain 2, double crochet, chain 2, double crochet, and just repeat this process until we reach the next raglan, but always chaining 2, skipping those stitches, and then working our double crochet into the chain 2 space in between each of the doubles. Picking up that chain 2 space, and then once more chain 2, double into the chain 2 space, and then from here chain 2 and work our next raglan into the center. So double, double, chain 3, and then 2 more double. Again, if I'm folding this piece on top of itself, so kind of touching the 2 raglans on top of each other, this is how the neckline should look. And we're just going to continue to add on more and more rows, and then these increases are going to widen the poncho over time. And from here, I'm just going to continue to repeat rows 3 over and over until I can get this poncho pretty long. I'm kind of aiming for like mid-thigh or maybe like hip action. When I figure out exactly how many rows, I will be back to show you guys exactly what the piece is looking like. Now, to create the asymmetrical poncho, we're going to follow very similar steps that we did for the other version, except there's going to be a lot less math. For the asymmetrical version, we really just need to create our starting chain in multiples of 3, and that's it. So for this version, I'm just going to be using the Friends Cotton Silk by Hobie. This is like a DK number 3. So it's a very similar weight of fiber that we did for the other version. I just wanted to keep it as simple as possible. And for this, I'll also be using a 5.5 millimeter crochet hook. And now I can start off with my basic slip knot. I'm just gonna bring that yarn through, insert my hook. And again, I wanna create a starting chain in multiples of 3. We want the starting chain to be long enough when it's connected to slip over our head, and depending if you guys also want like an off-shoulder look, make sure that you're making that starting chain wide enough to slip off of your shoulders. But just begin chaining again with your multiples of 3, and then again 1, 2, 3. All right, so for my starting chain, I decided to go for a chain of 75. And if we go ahead and just double check, 75 divided by our multiple of 3, we do have a flat number. We have 25 there. So with my chain of 75, again, I'm just going to make sure that I flatten it out, make sure that my chain has no twists, because we want to connect this in the round. So I'm just taking my time, making sure that my chain isn't twisted. And now that I've made sure that my chain is flat and there's no twists in it, I'm going to slip stitch into this very first chain in the row. So I'm just going to pick up that first chain space. And then from here I can yarn over and slip stitch the chain in the round. So we're fully connected again. And the main reason why I like to offer this asymmetrical version as well is that for the previous version, you needed a very strict set amount of chains. And for those of us that want a more specific sizing, or our measurements are off a little bit, like by an inch or 2, the asymmetrical version is a really great way to get very similar results, but again, not having to do so much math and be very strict with our guidelines. But now that we have our beginning chain connected in the round, we can go ahead and start working on row 1. And again, for row 1, I'm going to start with a chain of 3. 1, 2, 3, and this is going to count as our very first double crochet. From this point, I'm going to yarn over and place 1 double crochet into every chain space available. And since this chain of 3 already counts as our very first stitch, I can move on to the next available chain. I'm going to yarn over, turn my work over so that I can grab that back bump again. And this is just a personal choice so that we have even stretch. and I can work a double crochet, and again yarn over, picking up the back bump on the next stitch and working one double crochet, another double crochet, and just repeating this across the entire row, which means that at the very end of this row 1 I should have a total of 75 double crochet, including that chain 3. I can go ahead and finish out my very last stitch in the row, and again for me this should be my 75th double crochet. And now we can go ahead and connect our row in the round. So you can either pick up the top loop on that chain of 3, or you can go underneath the chain of 3 and slip stitch your row closed. For this purpose I'm just going to pick up the loop, slip stitch that row shut. So that is how the end of row 1 should be looking. And at this point we can go ahead and set down our work so that we can begin placing our stitch markers. Now, as I showed in the previous version, here at the very first stitch in the row, this is where we're going to create our first increase. But after this point you can kind of pick and choose where you want your stitch markers to go, and by stitch markers I do mean increases. So for tutorial purposes I'm just going to place a stitch marker right here into this very first stitch, just so that we can mark it and see for reference where the other increases should go. Now, of course, it's really up to you where you want to place all of your increases. If you would like, you can place them closer together or further apart. Because this is asymmetrical, it's really up to you how you kind of want this overall design to look. But because I'm going to have an increase right here on like the front side of our work, I'm just going to go ahead and pick a good old spot like right here for another increase point. And now I can get another stitch marker, kind of just gauge, let's say like right here for the next increase. And then to go ahead and kind of match that top one, I'll place another stitch marker right here. And again, this doesn't have to be perfect. I do want you guys to keep in mind that these stitch markers are going to serve as a reference point to where the increases should go. Because we are using this pattern in multiples of 3, we might not land perfectly on that increase point. We might be 1 stitch away or 2 stitches away. But again, this is just a general guideline to where we should be placing all of the increases. So at this point, let's go ahead and pick up our work again and begin working on row 2. So here at the very start of row 2, we need to begin with our first increase. I'm going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and that counts as the first double crochet. I'm going to yarn over and go back into the same stitch, so this very first double crochet in the row, or the chain 3, and work a double crochet. And then from here I'm going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and then place 2 more double crochet all into the same stitch. So I'm going right back into that chain of 3 at the start of the row. And here is my first increase. And from here I can chain 2, 1, 2, and we're going to skip the next 2 stitches, 1, 2, and work a double crochet in the next. And then again, chain 2 very loosely, skip 2, double crochet in the next. Again, chain 2 very loosely, skip 2, double crochet in the next, chain 2, skip 2, double crochet in the next. And I'm just going to repeat this pattern until I get really close to my first stitch marker. So as you can see, I just worked a double crochet, but then 2 stitches away I have my first stitch marker. So what I'm going to choose to do is technically move this stitch marker over 1 place. So what I'm going to do is chain 2, skip the next 2 stitches, and then double crochet into the next. And I'm going to count this stitch as my next increase point. So into this stitch I'm going to work a total of 2 double crochet, chain of 3, and then 2 more double. 2. So here is what the next increase point looks like. And this is what I meant when I said that these stitch markers will serve as a general reference point. Again, no guarantee that the stitch markers are going to land perfectly on a multiple of 3, but it's kind of up to you. You could have also chosen to work the increase over here instead of over here. It's all up to you. It's whatever you guys prefer. So I'm going to zoom you guys out a little bit because we kind of have an idea now of how this pattern is going to work. But again, from here I can chain 2, skip 2, double crochet in the next, chain 2, skip 2, double crochet in the next, and repeat this process until I approach my next stitch marker. And once more, we've repeated the same issue. So 2 stitches away, I have my next stitch marker. So following the same tip that I kind of did before, I'm going to chain 2 and skip 1, 2. I'm going to skip over that stitch, work into the next, and into this stitch is where I will create my next increase. So 2 double crochet, a chain of 3, and 2 double crochet. And this is pretty much how we will be creating our increases here for the very first row. So I'm just going to repeat the chain 2, skip 2, double crochet until I reach the next stitch marker. And I can kind of pick or choose if I want my increase to be a little bit closer or a little bit further. Chain 2, skip 2, and this time around we just so happen to land perfectly at that stitch marker. So I can go ahead and work that increase directly into that space. We have a 2 double crochet, chain of 3, and then 2 more double crochet. And then again, chain 2, skip 2, double crochet until the end of the row. And here at the very end of row 2, I can chain 2, skip 2, and then I'm going to slip stitch underneath the chain 3 from the very start of the row. So I'm just going to slip stitch row 2 shut, and this is how it should look. And then to go ahead and prep for the next row, I'm just going to pull up a little bit on my loop so that there's some room, and from here I'm going to slip stitch into the chain 3 into the center of that raglan. So I'm just going to slip stitch. So we're kind of just traveling or carrying our working yarn to the center of that stitch. And from here, row 2 is going to repeat. So I'm going to start with a chain of 3, 1, 2, 3, and then work another double crochet, chain of 3, and then 2 more double. So I'm stacking my raglans directly on top of each other. So this is how those raglan increases should be looking. And now that we have this first increase, I can chain 2, skip 2, and I'm going to place a double crochet into the chain spaces. So into the chain 2 spaces right here instead of into any physical stitch. So just picking up that mesh center, and then again chain 2, and then double crochet into the mesh center. So all of our double crochets from this point on will be worked into the chain 2 spaces. And then just continue on like this until we reach our next increase. Chain 2 into the next mesh. And now we're coming up onto that next increase point. So I'm going to chain 2, skip 2, and then I'm going to work my next increase into the chain 3 of our raglan increase. So into this big open space, I can pick up that stitch and work 1, 2 double, chain of 3, and 2 more double. So here is another raglan increase. And once more, I can chain 2, skip 2, work my doubles into the chain 2 spaces, chain 2, and then into that chain space. And essentially from this point onward, we are repeating the same exact steps from the previous poncho. Row 2 is going to repeat over and over until your poncho gets as long or as wide as you want it to. But I just wanted to show you guys what the asymmetrical version is going to look like. The increase points don't perfectly line up with each other, but that's kind of the beauty of it, again, is that you can pick and choose how close or how far apart you want all of your increases to be, which is going to add to the overall whimsicalness and asymmetricalness of this top. But at this point, I'm going to continue to work on my symmetrical version and my asymmetrical, and when they're both done or close to done, I can come back on camera and show you guys how to finish up the fringe and just kind of like overall comparisons between the two. All right, so I've put some serious work into this poncho, and as you can see, she's rather long. Unfortunately, I can't fit the entire poncho on camera, so I am going to include a few other clips here. I'm just going to lay it out on the floor so you guys kind of have the full picture of just how big and how wide I've made it. Now, I personally chose to make this with a total of 30 rows. When I'm measuring from the neckline to a flat section of the poncho, I ended up with, I believe, about 19 inches. And then another measurement from the neckline across the increase points, I think I had about 24.5 inches in total. So hopefully those two measurements kind of give you a better idea for how long this poncho is going to be on someone like me. And again, I am a little bit shorter. Now at this point, at the very end of my 30th row, I have just slip stitched into the very first chain 3 in the row. So there's my slip stitch, and I've already cut my yarn. I'm just going to yarn over and tighten off a nice strong knot so my poncho is not going anywhere. So this is what the very end of my 30th row is going to look like, and at this point we're ready to start attaching on some fringe. Now the very last thing that I want to do is add on some fringe into each of the chain 2 spaces, so all of these gaps that we have along the very last row of the poncho. Now total length of the fringe is going to of course be up to you and your discretion. But if I'm just kind of eyeballing here from the very end of my poncho, I'd say anywhere between 5 to 6 inches in length is going to be more than enough. It might even be a little bit too long for me. So what I'm actually going to do is use my phone to help me cut the fringe. The length of my phone runs just about 6 inches. So what I'm going to do, keeping with the double-stranded yarn, I'm just taking the yarn from the outer edge of my cakes because I do want the darker color for my fringe. But again, I'm going to have my yarn double-stranded, and I'm just going to take the tail end of my yarn and kind of wrap it around the front of the phone. And I'm really just going to do this, wrapping my yarn around my phone long ways just to get the length of the fringe. And once I have a good amount like this, I can pull the yarn off. And using my scissors, I'm only going to cut one loop of the yarn. So I'm only going to cut right here so that I'm still keeping that total length of about 6 inches. And I'm just going to repeat this a ton of times so that, again, in total, my fringe is going to be about 12 inches long. And then as we loop it onto the poncho, it will end up having a length of about 6 inches. So let me get some fringe going here. I'm just going to pull out a bunch of yarn from my cake, grab my phone again, and then just begin wrapping the yarn over and over and over. And once I have a good amount looped around, I can pull off the yarn and then just cut one loop end of the yarn. So this is kind of like my little cheat code way of getting a lot of fringe really fast. But if this isn't the length that you want, feel free to also just leave your measuring tape out on the table, and then you can manually line up your yarn and then cut however much you want over and over. Because I'm using a color changing yarn, I decided to cut strips in a few of the different shades throughout the cake. That way it kind of blends a little bit better. And all I'm really going to do is grab a few strands from both of the colors. So let's say 3 strands from one and 3 strands from the darker shade. And then I can just join them together like this. And now that I have all of my tassels combined, I'm just going to fold them in half like this. So I have the tail ends meeting up at the bottom, and I kind of have the center wrapped around my finger. And I'm just going to find any of the chain 2 sections on this last row, loop through the center portion of the tassels, and then reach through and grab the other tail ends. And then pull it through, and then just kind of gently tighten up the yarn like this. So this is kind of how I'm going to go about doing my tassels. Let's do a couple more. All right, again, I'm going to take about 3 strands of the lighter blue and then 3 strands of the darker blue. Try to line them up as best as possible. And then from here I can fold them in half, and I have the center of my yarn looped up right here. I'm going to find the next chain 2 space, pull the center of the yarn through, and then reach through. Just kind of reach through like this and grab the tail ends and then tighten it up on that chain 2 space. So here's 2 out of the probably 100 spaces that I need to do, but hopefully you guys kind of get the idea. I'm just going to continue to attach all of my fringe, and once that is done, I'll show you guys the final poncho reveal. All right, so I've made a significant amount of progress on this asymmetrical poncho, and I think I want to stop here because the other version is pretty long. I thought it'd also be really fun to have a little bit more of like a cropped version, and I've chosen to work up a total of 17 rows, including that first row of double crochet. So for the 17 rows, if I measure on a non-increase section, I have about 10 inches long, and if I'm measuring on an increase, it's about 13 inches long at the increase. So this is where I'm going to choose to stop because I still want to add some fringe along the bottom. And as for fringe along this one, instead of adding it onto every chain 2 space and then the chain 3s at the corners, I think it'd also be fun to kind of change it up and add the fringe into like every other chain space or even like every third, and I can make those sections a lot thicker.